I had to change my phone settings. I apologize. Someone called, some spam call, some robocall, and it cut the sound off. The timing was conspicuous. I don't have a suspect in mind, but apparently it's enough to derail the entire live stream. So I'm just starting over. I got this article in my inbox. Police warn of robot crime wave. So we're talking about drones looting the Walmarts, I guess. What would happen if tech were to land in the hands of terrorists and criminals who aren't beholden to the norms of modern warfare? A pan-European police agency, Europol's Innovation Lab, has imagined a not-so-distant future where criminals could hijack drones and humanoid robots to sow chaos. Everything is being outsourced. Why not this? Rounding out the cyberpunk dystopia vibes, according to the report, is that all the folks who were put out of a job as a result of automation may be motivated to commit cybercrime, vandalism, organized theft, often targeted at robotic infrastructure to survive. I haven't seen anybody trying to attack the replacements, but a lot of people are undoubtedly being replaced. A lot of gigs. Does anybody use Fiverr anymore? Is there anything that ChatGPT can't do to replace what previously you paid somebody to do? I find uses for it every single day. Law enforcement needs to evolve rapidly to keep up. You know, by the way, James Cameron is releasing another Terminator film. So we've got a new Terminator coming out. But the one that I'm hearing the most about right now is the Steven Spielberg Disclosure Day, which comes out in June. But I think also Odyssey is highly relevant, and it may have some relevance to the nuclear Poseidon, to Putin's weapon that could hit the US like a tsunami. And this would follow, Putin's Poseidon would follow along with the storyline of the Calypso capsule stranding the astronauts. Calypso's the one who stranded Odysseus. And then this Christopher Nolan film. So the significance of the Odyssey coming out with Christopher Nolan is that he and his brother have done Fallout and Oppenheimer. So the Odyssey and the Poseidon missile do have this kind of correlation here, because the Poseidon missile also relates to the ongoing body of symbolism that we see with the Kraken, Godzilla, and this repeated theme of this destruction of the West Coast, of Seattle, for example, specifically, by something from the sea. A sea-based 9/11. A sea attack. And I think there's something strong to that. There's quite a lot that lends to this particular narrative, including, the Hunt for Red October, which has specific relevance to Alec Baldwin, another one of these characters who plays Trump. And, we talk a lot about the predictive programming counterparts to these world stage characters. And that's why I took it as significant that the Charlie Kirk character has Trump's birthday. As we've noted, these previous examples in other movies where Trump is portrayed as, in some caricature, gets shot at. Like, that's a reoccurring theme. Like the Homelander being based on Trump. Like, these aren't obscure or occulted connections. These are pretty blatant. Not that they have to really cover it up. I mean, look what they did with Caesar in the Park, where Trump was Caesar, and they just stab him every night until Laura Loomer shows up and interrupts. But yeah, the Odyssey official trailer just dropped. It looks good. I'll probably reread it before. I mean, I have an interest in seeing this anyway. I've always liked the Iliad and the Odyssey, of course, but I don't think they can screw this up, in other words. It's pretty straightforward. After the Trojan War, Odysseus faces a dangerous voyage back to Ithaca, meeting creatures like the Cyclops, Polyphemus, Sirens, and Circe. Okay, now there is something here. His son's name is Telemachus, and Telemachus is the son of Odysseus and Penelope, who's always portrayed as crying, like real crying, not this Erica Kirk stuff. So you got this weeping Penelope, and it kind of reminds me that the crisis actress that we know as Waynell, who showed up at Thousand Oaks, who showed up as a Vegas victim, who showed up as some raging professor, and then she was at the Pulse. We all know who we're talking about, George Floyd's teacher. That particular actress, well, she's most well known for her role in the Pulse nightclub shooting where she's crying and crying outside. Her son's name is Telemachus. And so that might be her role. Like it was inspired by Greek tragedy. Lickety says, Professor Jang says Iliad was propaganda fake trash. Interesting. He has a lot of interesting things to say. I follow his channel. I have not watched that particular video. But what we're talking about here ultimately is this overarching theme of the space odyssey, the Odyssey, and how it merges with the destruction of the Tower of Babel, the nuke scenario, the significance of the Space Needle. And I've been watching the new Fallout, which has multiple references to the Space Needle in its imagery where there's a gun pointed at it. So what's the deal with the Space Needle? Well, it's another version of a symbol of this one world system. It also contains the whole UFO scenario, which again, that's somehow relevant again because Disclosure Day is coming up. Busy56 says, the Coen brothers adapted the Odyssey into a musical in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Right, with George Clooney. I think I've seen it. But we were talking about the Odyssey with regard to the Space Odyssey because of the stranded astronauts and the Calypso capsule. And so this theme was there, and we were thinking, well, after they arrive back, what happens next? Well, after escaping Calypso, there's a confrontation with the Cyclops and then Poseidon, which is timed perfectly with Putin and his threats of using the Poseidon missile against, here it is, this is from a month ago. Russia conducted its second nuclear-capable test in 10 days, the Poseidon underwater superweapon. Vladimir Putin announced the successful test of Poseidon 2M39, a revolutionary nuclear-powered torpedo capable of evading all existing defenses. The Kremlin's described it as a strategic breakthrough, signaling Moscow's determination to revive the 21st century arms race. Poseidon, powered by a compact nuclear reactor, can travel thousands of miles underwater, high speeds, extreme depths, 2 megatons, 133 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Now, the significance here again, the underwater attack, it connects to Godzilla, who's a metaphor for the nuke, who, by the way, has the birthday of 11/3, same as the One World Trade Tower. But it all ties into this general theme of the Kraken that we've been following since 2020. All of it pointing at Seattle. That's one of the overlapping themes here, Seattle and the nuke, but coming from the water. So now we have this super weapon that could do the job. And it seems to be correlating with everything else that's happening at this time. So I brought up the Tempest because the storm and all the storm references. Well, there's also the episode 4 of the show The Tempest, where it does cut to a nuclear submarine. Now, I think it was North Korean, but it's hard to say. But if that show has been consistently predictive of what's happening on the world stage, then it's not really far-fetched to suggest that that might be the next scene. That after everyone has Erica Kirk fatigue, and we just had Amfest, then it moves into the next stage. And I'm not sure, but I'm going to have to re-examine the Turner Diaries. But if you remember, the Turner Diaries is about this white nationalist Christian revolution thing that kicks off after the turning point, which is when their martyr dies. That book was the inspiration for Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing. And it has some elements like 9/11 sort of elements, like the Pentagon getting bombed in it. But one of the things about this Turner Diaries, this turning point theory, or script, I guess we should say, because that seems to be what we're going through right now, is it does involve the use of nuclear weapons by white nationalists against their enemies. And so I'm wondering here, we have other examples as well, but other indicators about the Space Needle being this next 9/11 event, being the iconic monument taken down. And it was actually designated a historic monument on 4/19/1999, which is the anniversary of Waco in Oklahoma City. Tominoid says Godzilla Minus Zero is expected to be released on June 1st, 2026. Okay, I watched Godzilla Minus One, and there's quite a lot with Godzilla when you get into the symbolism, but I think the most pronounced stuff has been recently the correlation of Godzilla with the nuke. You know, we had the summer of Barbieheimer when Oppenheimer came out, but you also had Barbie out, and they kind of conflated the two. Well, I think Barbieheimer thing was followed by the release of that Godzilla movie. And again, Godzilla is the nuke. These are just symbols, essentially. But that's what he was consciously designed for. And we mentioned the Paris Olympics recently in this context. And the Paris Olympics opens up with the French Revolution theme, Marie Antoinette decapitated, and the band that performs the French Revolutionary song is Gojira, which is the Japanese name of Godzilla. And you did have plenty of post-apocalypse nuke, Planet of the Apes stuff at that time, with like the destruction of the Statue of Liberty in some of the imagery. And in Brazil the other day, heavy winds knocked over a replica of the Statue of Liberty. But yeah, the Godzilla, Poseidon, Kraken stuff, the stuff goes far back. And there's as much, if not more, predictive programming for the destruction of the Space Needle than there was for the Twin Towers. And we've been following this for some time. And I kind of thought, well, maybe the Space Needle is just something else. Maybe this is a misinterpretation. But after seeing Final Destination, Bloodlines, it's kind of hard to deny that these are interconnected psyops. That there's the sea base attack on the West Coast and the air base attack on the East Coast. The Seattle Space Needle nuke scenario is present in so many movies. And it can also be Los Angeles, like T2. But again, the reoccurring theme here is Space Needle for one reason or another. And I have a few ideas, but it was also very prevalent in Westworld, as it's very prevalent now using the Vegas Space Needle in Fallout. And these movies are, like, we're referencing directors who've already been heavily represented in the area of predictive programming. The Fallout series even had predictive imagery for the upcoming Butler, Pennsylvania headshot thing. So we're talking about meta-scripters. So when the meta-scripters release a movie like The Odyssey, there has to be a deeper significance to it. Donna South said, I'm late. Thought to look for you at Fakeologist. Yeah, we have to get back into a regular schedule with Fakeologist, probably next week. But I thought, just in case I was going to start early, I wasn't sure what his plan was. We hadn't touched base since I returned from my media fast. Yeah, there are no withdrawals. At no point did I miss checking updates or updating anything. There's just so much going on that I didn't even notice it. So just if there is a big blackout, an EMP, you might even find life more entertaining and fun for a long time. Like, it's almost scary how little the metaverse actually matters when compared to the meatverse. But yeah, I give it 10 solid days. And I did miss a few things, like the Brown University shooting, the Bondi Beach shooting, the Rob Reiner stabbing. But in the course of that week plus, the Discord server had done its job. And all of these events are similar. These are variants, variations of the psychological operation. But you have one event in particular, the Bondi Beach, where you have an actor from 10/7 who shows up 2 weeks before, warns of anti-Semitism, and I think arson attacks, and the guy's name was Arson. And then he takes a photo of himself after he gets shot in the head. He does a selfie for Twitter. And then he gets mad on Twitter when people say he looks fake because of the way they wrapped the cheesecloth on his head and didn't bother to wipe the blood off his face. Meanwhile, the hero who raised $2.5 million on GoFundMe, the guy who disarmed the shooter, that guy gets shot in the arm and the hip, and we don't see any blood because cheesecloth guy took it all. But the guy's on Twitter defending himself against all these AI memes mocking his performance, which is mockable. But again, you have a repeat victim at a Hanukkah event who was previously at the other the rave event in Israel, calling out the story in advance. Oh, there's going to be anti-Semitic attacks, and he happens to get shot at one. Come on. At the Brown University, you had 2 students who were at 2 different mass shooting events beforehand. One of them was a star of the Parkland shooting, and the other one was from some shooting in California. But again, these are hoax indicators, recycled crisis actors, recycled scripts. And the Rob Reiner one was puzzling at first, but Synchromorpheus picked up on this Dr. Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster subtext here in their relationship and how they were presented, specifically the photography of Nick Reiner. Well, then after this, I point out that, interestingly, their brother, Jake Reiner, is a reporter in the show or the film called Monster about the Menendez brothers who killed their parents. And this was even talked about in USA Today as a, quote, tragic coincidence. So tragic coincidence. Okay, fine. But what we have here, the monster theme, the killing of the parents, and then we looked into the Frankenstein stuff, and there's quite a lot there, from Rob Reiner's father being friends with the director of Young Frankenstein. And then you had this other element. Well, the comedian Bill Hader, the actor, was at the party where Nick went a little crazy before he went to go home and kill his parents. And that guy has a number of connections with Frankenstein, including playing Frankenstein on SNL. So there's a lot of Frankenstein's monster stuff in this mix. And then, of course, Rob Reiner getting stabbed by Cartman on South Park, season 7, episode 13. The significance there, of course, is Cartman's role in this. I mean, Cartman knocks the Charlie Kirk character off the stool in that episode of South Park that preceded the assassination event. So to have Cartman also stabbing Rob Reiner, among other things we've been picking up on. Yeah, that was interesting, Busy, that you posted about how Triumph the dog suggested that Rob Reiner eats his children. Very much Kronos. I picked up on a lot of that symbolism in the Fantastic Four, where you have Galactus, who's this Kronos-like Saturnian character devouring the planets, and he wants to devour the baby, which is very much like Saturn eating his child. And in one montage, the Human Torch is actually pretending to eat the baby. And in the previous Fantastic Four, you do see the shadow of Galactus over Saturn. That whole movie was encoded sun worship. The Fantastic Four going into the sun, getting their powers from the sun. That was a theme with that and Superman. And both of these movies had repeated elements. Like Fantastic Four had an allusion to the Space Needle EMP stuff falling from the sky. Then you had, I think it was called the Thunderbolts. But that was a big theme all at once. These several movies were all seemingly foreshadowing stuff falling from the sky, like Megalopolis. But then recently you had that TV show about the fire department 113. I think it's called Tennessee or something, or Nashville. What's that fireman show called? But there's a lot of predictive content out there right now for some kind of space disaster. But then there's also the stuff from the sea. And I kind of think that to pull off EMP and to create a lot of fallout, we should expect some high altitude detonations. So it could be a mix of things. And I think I saw something earlier about space wars. Here it is. Starlink in the crosshairs, how Russia could attack Elon Musk and his conquering of space. Okay. Russia's developing a new anti-satellite weapon to target Elon Musk's Starlink constellation with destructive orbiting clouds of shrapnel to rein in Western space superiority that helped Ukraine succeed on the battlefield. The so-called zone effect weapon would flood Starlink orbits with hundreds of thousands of high-density pellets, disabling multiple satellites at once, but risking catastrophic collateral damage to other orbiting systems. Well, I think one of these Starlink satellites hit the Chinese space station, and they were stuck for a minute. So yes, Space Wars is kind of on the table. And Miles Mathis finally caught up on this article, which we've been talking about since it came out, about how, he says, I learned today, here it is, by accident, that I'm going to add to my long paper on this, but I'll put here first instead. I've proved JFK faked his death like Lincoln before him. But here's what he's talking about, the Vanity Fair article. November of 2024, Vanity Fair and Daily Mail broke this story, and it didn't get much traction in mainstream or alternative, which is why I hadn't tripped across it until now. None of my readers alerted me to it. So I think this is strange that nobody's talking about this one. Everyone is talking about the JFK files about to be released, but nobody was talking about this. The fact that before his death, 2 months before, he and Jackie did a assassination spy thriller film at home where JFK faked dead covered in Heinz 57. So here he talks about it. JFK and his family wrote and filmed a James Bond type movie about his assassination 2 months before he was allegedly shot in Dallas, just for fun, as one does. Kennedy wrote the script himself, played the lead, and Jackie directed it. He dies in the end with blood pouring out of his mouth. Another sequence shows a station wagon full of Secret Service agents pulling up to the house and screeching to a halt before 8 jump out of the vehicle. Among them was Roy Kellerman, who was later in charge of the agents in Dallas, riding in the limo in the front passenger seat. And Paul Landis, the First Lady's agent. She asked them to participate in the project, saying, quote, "We're making a movie about the president's murder. We'd like you and the other agents to run towards the door." They did, and they found the president on the floor with ketchup smeared all over him, and Jackie standing on the suitcase. So this is Miles Mathis finally noticing this. Hilarious, right? Hell no. It does play into my analysis, as you can see here, why this was suppressed for 60 years. The reporters in 2024 try to spin it as another weird instance of foreshadowing or a cosmic anomaly, but we know better. None of these things that used to look like coincidences do anymore. Obviously, the fake assassination had been in the works for some time, and the Kennedys were aware of the larger script. And they were so invested in the fun, they couldn't wait for it to go live, and they created their own little production, staging it over a weekend at the Hammersmith Farm in Rhode Island. There's no way this is mere macabre coincidence or morbid foreshadowing, which is how they tried to play it off. It says, it reminds us again that this is a family of actors, not lawyers, not politicians. I mean, this is a valid point. They wanted to make their own movie complete with presidential assassination on the farm, proving once again that none of that was ever what you thought it was. It was staged. His presidency was staged, and that of every other president, including the current one. So this is more on the fake JFK assassination by Miles Mathis. And again, it's a reference to the Vanity Fair article that nobody talked about. Guess they played it down, but they're totally goofing around. Anybody who's still participating in politics is acting incongruent with their wider understanding of fake media at this point. Like, if you know they fake events, if you know some events are staged, you have to recognize that all of the politicians, they're part of the same infrastructure. They may not know about everything. Kevin Mooring says, where are we at when Candace and Tucker are under fire from Tim Pool? Right. Yeah, Tim Pool, though, has always sort of been on the fence. Like, I couldn't tell, is he woke right? Is he neocon? Is he kind of playing both sides? He's a little too moderate milquetoast for me. But yeah, he's gone up against Candace Owens. It could be professional jealousy. He doesn't strike me as somebody who's very much in the know, however. Candace Owens has got, Q security clearance. She's up there. She has to know Charlie Kirk is alive because she's part of that story. She's been a part of his story from the beginning. So Candace Owens is very well aware of the fact that Charlie Kirk's not dead. And this entire soap opera about Candace really loved him, J.D. Vance got Erica Kirk pregnant, and Erica Kirk is evil, and she killed Charlie for Israel. Like, all of these various storylines are designed for the masses. All of them are based on the presumption that these people are real. Like, yeah, Charlie's neck wound was a squib. That was fake. But so are the people around him, up to and including the vice and the main president. I mean, we're talking about the theater of Psywar, where politics is more or less a steam valve for the public to blow off their frustrations and to give them the illusion of control. But they're all fake. I don't believe that Erica and Charlie had any children. And all the people falling for it are fools. It really, that is the case. Fools as much as Truman in the Truman Show. The guy's a fool. He's ignorant. And the world of lies contains him so long as he remains ignorant. Yeah, exactly, says commenter Dave J420. As soon as you start to argue the detail, you go too far. Don't fall for it at all. Exactly. They get you in the weeds with these stories. And see, that's what I call reinforcement programming. So you've got the predictive stuff that lead up to the event, sometimes decades in advance, which gives you an idea of how old the PSYOP script is. But then as you get close to the PSYOP, you have the concurrent programming. All propaganda vectors, including influencers, they create the buzz and reinforce the event as it happens. So the story goes down the right way. This is followed by endless reinforcement programming, where it's talked about endlessly, the minutia, the nuance, the details, the intrigue, all of it built upon the presumption that the event was real. The reinforcement programming constitutes the majority of it. And that's how an event goes from being scheduled to being performed to being carved into stone and made a part of the consensus reality, our worldview, our historic narrative. So you have past, present, future that relate to history, news, and scheduled events on the program leading up into the future. And this process is aided by the entrainment between all media to deliver programming in advance, concurrent with the event, and then endless rehashing of the event afterward. This is the structure of it. Media is not what people think it is. In fact, nor is government when you get down to it. And I'm not being cynical, I'm not being overly simplistic. This is actually true. This is a collective blind spot that we all have, where our approach to media consumption is borderline religious. There's religiosity involved more than level-headed, skeptical parsing of the facts. No, it's definitely religious at this point. Pure idolatry. Did you watch Amfest? Idolatry. Some of it ominous. You got these pentagrams and dark figures and the graphics, and then you have the recreation of the death scene of Charlie Kirk, where you can sit where he sat and you can buy a Freedom shirt. And I don't know if they have squibs or anything so you could get squibbed, or maybe you could use a filter, but yeah, they recreated the death scene. These people are gross and insane. And of course, we talked about this the other day. Megyn Kelly says she prays to Charlie, and then Charlie's ghost comes down to Candace. Then Nicki Minaj comes out weirdly and describes J.D. Vance as the assassin. This makes zero sense. I feel like we're all being gaslit. And then there were multiple examples of Freudian slips. And when I first caught the Freudian slip, where Erica Kirk is talking about the judicial system and how she has confidence in it, but she stuttered on the word. And then she said, the judicial system. And I was like, okay, that's going to excite the woke right. And it absolutely did. They all ran to it. Like, oh, that's intentional. Well, okay, so I'm like, that's probably not a Freudian slip, however. Like, this is part of the script, where I thought, okay, this has got to be a strategy, where they're throwing in engagement bait that look like Freudian slips. And that's not the only one. She had mentioned how things would be so much better once Charlie got assassinated, as though she had foreknowledge. That was a slip. She referred to continuing the grift when she meant to say gift. Another intentional slip. And then you have J.D. Vance, who refers to Minneapolis as Mogadishu, and he says, oh, a little Freudian slip there. So here he is making a joke about a Freudian slip. So in other words, this is a tactic. Everything is scripted. All these headlines that you see are the result of carefully constructed, made to go viral situations or statements. Kevin Mooring says, is Megyn Kelly Nicole Brown Simpson, and we just had another murder in Brentwood? Well, Nicole Brown Simpson's sister said that the stabbing in Brentwood triggered her. So we have that. I don't know if they're the same person. All right, so right now it looks like, I don't know if Fakeologist is on. I tried to go on there, but I had no audio or sound. So we're just going to continue here because it's about 7, and plus he had fake nukes Phil on. Okay, the trailer for the Odyssey has just been released, and then there's the trailer for Disclosure Day. And the Disclosure Day thing seems to indicate the aliens are arriving through some sort of possession or something along those lines. So if you haven't seen the trailer for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, again, the significance here, Christopher Nolan is in fact a major league meta scripter. And you got Fallout, Oppenheimer between the Nolan brothers. So there's something here emerging. And I'm thinking too, there might be some significance to the sea as it relates to space. And we were talking about the Space Odyssey. And there's been some correlations between the two. When we talk about symbols, like the interchangeable symbols, the symbol of the sinking Titanic, as that relates to the space station, for example. So now we have the mention in the news of Russia both threatening space wars and threatening to unleash a tsunami weapon against the West Coast. All right, I'm going through my Twitter feed. Christian Bale put on 8,600 pounds for the role of the one-eyed giant Cyclops in Christopher Nolan's adaptation of Homer's The Odyssey. See, I don't know if that's true. We'll follow along with that story, but it's always notable to pay attention to the meta scripters. And I still need to watch part 2 of Wicked, because part 1 is definitely Antifa coded. You have the green skin witch who launches an EMP and creates a blackout in the Emerald City. And the Emerald City is Seattle. Kevin Mooring says the blackout in California, like leave the world behind, all the electric cars stopped. Yeah, it was during the middle of the night, right? I don't know how big of a deal it was, 130,000. Probably some kind of ceremonial purpose. They're doing some occult stuff in the dark. I mean, this is a significant night. We're talking about the solstice. The cult that runs the world, the design authority, the strangers, the men in black, the agents, whatever you call them, they have control over time. And we've been describing this for some time. Total time control through a media monopoly and a system for proactively creating history. So the control over time and all this kind of partially explains their obsession with timing and these holidays that are based on the witches' Sabbats, these older pagan traditions, but I think it's all part of the same system. By the way, we're coming up on, of course, a new year, and New Year's Eve is a night where they essentially worship Sirius, or we do, I guess. If you're doing the countdown and watching the ball drop, yeah, that's pretty much a pagan ritual to the star that David Icke says the gods come from. Nothing much to see here at AmFest. A high-resolution Illuminati triangle and swirling pentagrams with the mysterious dark entity hovering in the middle. Watch as the Roman Catholic rosary is lifted high to claim the event. So yeah, you have these pentagons in the background. And there's multiples, like layered. Like this is some kind of heavy metal concert, black metal. And there is some figure in black at the very back there. Could be Ozzy. Could be Klaus Schwab. But it looks like one of the strangers from Dark City. And then you have Jack Pizzagate coming out, flexing with his rosary. Before that, he has his kids coming out, praying the Hail Mary in Latin. So what do you call that? You know, what do you call this? I think that this is older than Catholicism and Christianity. The cross is an older symbol. And combined with the worship of Erica Kirk, is idol worship, I think there's something behind this. I mean, I'm not reading too much into the pentagrams, pentagons, Illuminati eyes. I don't think. And then yesterday, we were talking about and I put this in my Tim Osman Substack blog. We were talking about how you have this guy from TPUSA, Paul Villele, who co-wrote Mind Wars with Maga, that's the 5th degree priest in the Temple of Set, with the high priest, theistic Satanist Michael Aquinos. So this guy from TPUSA co-wrote a book on mind wars and psychological warfare with the high-ranking Satanist, and now he's just on the board of directors for TPUSA. So that connection here between Satan and PSYOPs is in the DNA of TPUSA. And this also has another element to add to it, which is this guy was also a promoter of QAnon. He legitimized it. Look at, he says Scientology connections. I've heard Scientology connections. I got to dig deeper. I've heard some Scientology with Candace Owens, but I got to dig. Mock Scientology if you want, but you're pretty much a Scientologist. It's like the de facto state religion, because we do have a space religion, and we could call it NASAtology. They've delivered all the miracles. But it's fundamentally no different than Scientology, because Scientology is a utopian religion based on this idea of man going to space and transcending the world and living sustainably, multiplanetary. It has all of that. But there's another element to Scientology that's especially pertinent to how our worldview is maintained here, and it has to do with censorship and the concept of mind viruses and guard-railing minds, controlling the flow of dangerous mind viruses, which they call engrams. But essentially, if you took the pandemic model, lock everyone down, vax, clear everybody, get rid of the misinfo, everybody gets out. Well, replace the virus with the mind virus. And that's the Scientology scenario, that the world is infected with the pandemic of mind viruses that need to be cleared, and that the people who carry them transmit them. And so there's this need to quarantine, to self-segregate from society and separate based on who is and who isn't cleared. So there's a process to essentially decontaminating, vaxing the mass mind. That this would result in the salvation of mankind. No more crime, no more violence, no more illness. We can overcome these things if we get rid of all the engrams. But if you look at how modern media has taken on the role of state church and is doing the same thing, well then how is it any different? The mainstream objective of guard-railing all minds, putting us in this massive Truman Show and cutting us off from all of the wrong thing, the misinformation that might cause us to question the duopoly. And then you combine that with our space utopianism. Yeah, we're pretty much Scientologists. What's the difference? And that's where we're at right now. This whole disease X concept. They've already introduced the idea of how to handle a pandemic, how to do the lockdown, and how to survive. They've already brought us through that. But I'm saying that was there to train us for the unleashing of the mind virus that they use as a pretext for shutting down the internet. Like, you don't go back online without a digital ID, which is the equivalent of a mask. And after the Charlie Kirk event and the stabbing on the subway, you had formerly free-thinking, off-the-grid comedian Owen Benjamin advocating for digital ID. Like, maybe we all do need an ID to go on the internet. I'm like, you're the one who's the most banned comedian on earth, and now you're talking about this default ban against everybody. But disease X is going to emanate from X itself. That's why Musk bought it. He got rid of, he's like, I got to get rid of the woke mind virus. Well, yeah, he suppressed the left one, the woke left mind virus, sure. But he opened the gates for the woke right mind virus. And the woke right mind virus has been represented in movies like Civil War, and it's been symbolically presented as the ape, the violent chimpanzee in a number of films and scenarios, but this repeated theme together coming out of 28 Days Later with the rage monkeys and that rage virus that they caught by watching too much violent television. Now, look, I'm not a Nasatologist, but I do recognize what they have done as the state church media has to perform miracles. So we get our myths, we get our 9/11s, we get our Sandy Hooks, we get our Charlie Kirk martyrs. So we got martyrs and myths and villains, martyrs like George Floyd. Derek Chauvin's the villain, but they're trying to get him out. But then you have miracles. And the miracle psyops are things like landing on the moon. And whether or not you believe it's real, the landing on the moon event, the propaganda, served to put all mankind in a single worldview. It synchronized us. It put us all on the same sheet, like a miracle, like a religious miracle. It demonstrated the dominance of scientism and science as the new religion. So I would say it constitutes a miracle more than anything. And then the other element of it was one giant leap for all mankind. The one step for mankind thing was, significantly, we were all brought into a singular paradigm with that. It's the big psyops that unite us all. And then we have all the small ones within. But they have to have us within the giant Truman Show infrastructure itself first. And by the way, when he was on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, one of the first things he did is he got out and he performed the Eucharist. He brought out a wine glass, poured some wine, had some bread, and he gave himself the Holy Communion on the moon. And this was kind of kept sort of quiet because atheists were already getting mad at NASA because they were using so much biblical rhetoric in their missions. But it's always been a religious thing. I mean, I first started looking at this stuff critically when I was thinking, wait a minute here. What's with all these rockets with these names referencing, pagan sun gods? What's that about? These almost seem to be obelisks. And the closer I looked at it, the more it occurred to me that space is just a new iteration of heaven. But unlike all the other heavens and paradises that people fight over here on earth, they gave us a heaven that everybody believes in. Lickety Split says, Professor Jang says, any attempt to alter the worldview is to diminish your gnosis monad spark. Yeah, look, I'm pretty much a Gnostic. I mean, I was agnostic, borderline atheistic, but I had some ideas that didn't fit into conventional religions. But now I'm pretty much Gnostic, because I'm not a person of faith. I'm just going off of what I experience. And I do get the idea that not only is your soul spark imprisoned in matter, but the worldview they give you and the programming that makes you compatible with it is specifically one that excludes the very existence of a soul. Like, do you believe you have a soul? If your answer is no, I'd like to talk to you. I'd like someone to say to me, yeah, I'm just an animal. Just an animal with an ego. And you are too. And your talk about the soul is just coping with the fact that nothing means anything. And we're just highly evolved apes. Like, if you believe it, just say it. Because I think it's funny. Like, okay, cool. You're an ape. I mean, I look at man as something of a chimera. Like, we're sort of like sandwiched between, we're strung out between two extremes, beast and angel. And most people live at the level of beast. And the paradigm they've given us is the one compatible with the beast and its ego. Because the ego is the center of perception specifically rooted in the physical body, in the meat suit. And I don't think that that is the entirety of our being. But I think that that aspect of our consciousness that is outside of this limited ego framework is deliberately ignored, obfuscated, misdescribed, and even externalized. So the idea of intuition is relegated to paranormal or delusion or mental illness, and not an aspect of our minds that should be commonplace and part of how you view the world, in my opinion. But I think we've been denied a great deal of situational awareness. But I say this based on my experiences. I can't tell people what to believe. I mean, if you don't have a functioning intuition, if you don't have precognitions, telepathy, if none of these things are a part of your daily existence, if you don't have a cybernetic feedback loop, synchronistic messaging and guidance from some source, then what am I going to do? You know, it's not up to me to tell anyone what to believe. But I've noticed these things my entire life. However, it was only in the last couple of years I started to really think about it closely and rule out the idea that this is some external thing. Like, I think many instances where people think that God or some intercessor, some angel, a spirit, where something is speaking to them, I think this entire time we've been speaking to ourselves. I think what we think of as God is likely just an echo. And this occurred to me when I was trying to understand the mechanism by which synchronicity works. And I likened it to echolocation, where you're a bat in the dark and you send signals out there and the signals bounce back and it tells you what's ahead in the dark. Well, if we look at the future as pure darkness, as in unknown, it doesn't exist until it's experienced, then the concept of synchronicity can be explained as your intention, your will, your thoughts projected into the future in some way. Your higher or wider awareness is able to reply in an idiosyncratic way. And this is what we experience as synchronicity or guidance. But that reply, like echolocation, guides you through this unknown. But I've been thinking about this quite a lot, and I think that the way we think of our subconscious, no one thinks when they hear a voice in their head, you're having inner dialogues. At no point do you think you're talking to God. I mean, unless you're certifiably, ill, you don't make the mistake of externalizing your inner self as some higher power. You're just like, that's part of my mind that may not be perfectly integrated into the ego. Like, you have this wider self. The ego is more or less an aperture, a limiter, so you have a cohesive view. But I think it would be a mistake to attribute synchronicity, intuition, or any kind of guidance to anything higher than yourself. But I'm open to this concept, the Jungian concept of the collective unconscious, insofar as it could be that part of the self that isn't centered in the body may be somewhat transpersonal and may in fact merge with others to various degrees. Like, there may be this other level. My point of it is, this level of thinking or this line of thinking is not compatible with your programming. It's not compatible with the worldview that you're comported for. it's automatically ruled out as crazy, paranormal, insane, or nonsense. And so my point here is that I think that's by design. I think part of the design here, like, is essentially making you gullible, keeping you susceptible to manipulation, and maintaining a status quo of ignorance, egocentric, narcissistic cultures with self-centered, solipsistic, subjectivist populations who are ruled over by the architects of their internalized Truman Show, who rule over them at multiple levels. I mean, I harken back to the first CEO, founder of Netflix, his uncle, Edward Bernays, and his other one, Sigmund Freud. Just combine Netflix with Sigmund Freud and Edward Bernays, and what do you have? The father of public relations and PR stunts, an understanding of our subconscious minds, and then the most popular propaganda outlet on the planet. Like, that's a perfect description of how this thing actually works. But again, my point here is that the system that we're in is designed for egos in meat suits. And if you're not that, you're more or less marginalized, minimized. And this is very consistent, if you think about it, with the Gnostic concept of a world designed to keep imprisoned soul sparks from becoming aware of their own inner spark, and to instead keep them mired in darkness and catering to their senses, their entertainment, and their worldliness, allow them to maintain the amnesia that they were born with, so they never awaken the soul spark, and their soul spark then becomes part of the system itself. In other words, the world will devour your soul if you don't unplug. And honestly, I think if you can't unplug from the media, I'm not sure about news media, but if you can't unplug from the worldview it gives you, if you can't see the separation between the real world and the augmented reality, the hyper reality, then I don't think there's very much hope for your soul spark. Like, I wonder if these things are, like, can you have some level of awareness at the soul level and still be fully deceived? I suppose there are some people who just, their bullshit detectors are so good they don't even need to plug in. Perhaps they already know. But I certainly think there's a war on what you could just say broadly, awareness, situational awareness. And if you look at most of the red pill stuff, which I'm so critical of, like the people who are scared of clouds, it's to keep you scared of everything, to keep you in a state of fear. And if you look at the various like models of consciousness, like the chakras, the tree of life, all these various concepts have this idea that you have a lower material self and then this more transcendent self. And that transcendence involves the vertical integration of all these centers of awareness. However, the fear in particular keeps you down at the very bottom, connected to mere survival, physical survival. It's the opposite of transcendent. And when I look at all these various red pill conspiracy theories, they're all based on keeping you scared about everything, scared and paranoid. And I think being scared and paranoid is so low vibration that it effectively keeps a lot of the truth seekers away from what you would consider to be the Gnostic idea of an integrated consciousness, of transcending the material world while you're still in it, being in it but not of it. But I was kind of leaning into this Gnostic concept before I ever looked closely at the fake news. And then when I started looking at the fake news after having had something of an awakening to this, it immediately struck me as fake, and I could see this as layered. So we're talking about one mundane layer. We're talking about mind control. But I'm saying when you get past the mind control, it's soul control. But how do you deal with that? Well, the concept of the Gnosticism also includes the idea of knowing that you think your way out of this. You understand your way out of it. And if you think about it, that's what we have done when it comes to the off-world stage perspective. Empirical research, observations, thinking, debating, we have arrived at a model of media itself, which is inclusive of the long-term effects of fake news events on the dominant timeline and the other conclusions, such as events are planned in advance, years in advance, if not decades, and then considering the implications of this. But we've refined a methodology for mass media deconstruction for media consumption, which is fundamentally different from alt and mainstream patterns of consumption, as in we're active and skeptical, rather than passive and credulous/incredulous. So this is a completely different operating system. And the people who are still adhering to the old operating systems really stand out now, especially in our Discord server. Dave J lost his wrench because he believes in chemtrails. He's scared of clouds. Like, there's no fear, and there's no chemtrails off-world stage. I'm not triggerable, I'm not scared, and I actually enjoy the ice in the sky, the lines that the airplanes make. I think it's beautiful, like painting. All right, let's see what else we have here. Was Erica a Mossad honey trap from day one? How predictable are these storylines? Everything you're being told here, you're meant to believe. And why are people giving crap to Andrew Tate just because he lost a boxing match? I don't think we should shame people for losing necessarily. Like the people who say, oh, we won the Super Bowl. No, you were sitting on your couch eating potato chips. We went to the moon. No, you heard about it secondhand. No, Dave J, I'm literally not triggered. I just think it's funny that you're a vinegar sprayer. Or do you boil it? How do you get rid of chemtrails over your house? Because I know you don't wear a mask. You don't wear a mask because it's not a big deal. But it's big enough of a deal for you to make a big deal about it every time somebody brings it up. So you don't spray vinegar, so you're not doing your part. If you're going to fly in an airplane, you should at least take part in some chemtrail reduction measures. I don't know if people know this, but apparently you can engage in chemtrail mitigation simply by boiling vinegar in your front yard. All right, here's a clip here. Rob Reiner getting stabbed. Cartman stabs Rob Reiner with the fork, causing him to die by leaking a green goo. What is that? Busy56 says Dave J is a J pillar. Oh, he's a J pillar and a crotch zoomer. Like, anybody who's going to tell me that Donald Trump is a woman is going to have to explain to me how, quote, she gave birth to Barron while at the age of 62. There's no way. When was Donald Trump pregnant? I mean, some of these conspiracy theories are auto-debunking. And you know what? You can't even call them theories. You need to stop using the word theory if it isn't actually a viable theory when compared to the prevailing theory. So chemtrail theory isn't a good theory because condensation trails, which is not a theory, is a far better explanation. It's modelable. It's predictable. They say theory because it makes them sound legit. And the media calls them conspiracists. Oh, you're a conspiracist. So they can call you a racist. Tom Anoid says surrogate's easy. Yeah, I don't think it's easy. You see, because the problem with it is that if your conspiracy theory falls flat because the facts don't line up and you have to invent a secondary theory, you already lose. So you point out inconsistencies in the theory, they make up new stuff. So now your theory is that the Trumps don't even have their own children. Well, now you have to go back through every example of their children, all the news stories, and try to discredit the idea that they had their own children. Dave J says they are energized elemental trails. Yeah, but you don't have any evidence for that. You know, I could say chemtrails are actually unicorns marking their territory in the stratosphere because they fly. And that's what they're spraying. But they use holograms, magic holograms that they shoot out of their horns to make it look like airplanes to trick us below. Like that has as much validity as what you said. Energized elemental trails. It's just lazy on your part. It's lazy for you to posit the existence of something such as energized magical trails without first explaining away condensation trails, which are very well understood and documented. But anyway, chemtrail alarmism doesn't belong in rational discussions like this unless we're deconstructing it. And so if you're a chemtrail alarmist, you're pretty much like the people on the woke left who are alarmed about CO2 and the overconsumption of dino juice. You're basically Greta. And I've noticed that chemtrail people get very triggered when you don't believe them. They get so mad. They get so angry. They start screaming, "How dare you?" Like, I'm waiting to see Dave J at the UN. Just, "How dare you?" to everyone. How dare you not believe? Plus, chemtrail, nobody's died of chemtrail lung. Nobody's died. Nobody's cried from it. Dave J says they're going to be used for a communication net. Okay. Cool story. It's just science fiction. But it's not true. And then what's more, in addition to totally making all this stuff up, who did it? Who's behind it? And how do you know it's a bad thing? How do you know it's not vitamins or life extension? Like, conspiracy theorists are like, don't eat McDonald's because they put baby meat in the breakfast burritos. If you really believe that, you would be protesting McDonald's every day. You wouldn't let your family eat there. But no, you're just going to casually drop it into a Twitter feed at some point. Yeah, McDonald's serves baby meat. Like, it's a morbid thing to believe, and it's sick if you believe it and you never bothered to protest it. What kind of person doesn't stop baby eating cannibals in their own neighborhood? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, what will it take to activate you? If the thought that babies are being served in breakfast burritos doesn't get you out of your bed and make you go fight the system. But anyway, I don't think that's true. Ears Up says humans are too toxic to eat. I think it's more likely, given how this world seems to work, that they would be putting life extension in the Big Mac sauce. Because no business can survive if its business is killing its customers. Quite the opposite. McDonald's has every incentive to put life extension in the burgers. It has every incentive to make you live to be 150. Because they can serve you Big Macs for as long as you live. Dave J says, look into how the LCD screen is made. That's the same way the Sky screen is being produced. Yeah, Project Bluebeam is old news. Nobody cares. They're not going to Project Bluebeam us so we see something in the sky that convinces us of something when they use your smartphone to just beam it directly into your brain. I mean, the TV screen does what Project Bluebeam was rumored to be one day capable of doing. No, we believe a bunch of fake stuff because we see it on TV. We don't need to see it in the sky in an actual hologram. Dave J says, you are already seeing things in the sky. I have not. I've never seen a UFO. I've never seen a space station. I've only ever seen airplanes and the occasional helicopter. But no. By the way, shout out to Dookie, who will be receiving copies of the handbook for the recently deprogrammed for his work of going through and finding some minor changes. So I was updating this manuscript, submitting it tonight at about 11 o'clock. And then in the morning, I'm ordering copies to be sent here overnight, which I'll sign and send out. So I have a link here. I'll make sure I get it out to you. If you want a signed copy of the handbook for the recently deprogrammed, I'm ordering probably 2 dozen. And the link is at ips.monster. Look, this isn't a criticism, Dave J, but I think that you've been hit with a barrage of agitprop designed to make you afraid of the sky, of the government, to make you exist in a chronic state of fear, which will you then spread like a mind virus to others, telling everybody else to be afraid of what you're afraid of, like a Chicken Little. And I don't think it's good for your health. I do believe in psychosomatics. And while I don't believe in chemtrails, I do think that chemtrail lung is something that could kill you. Because if you believe in chemtrails hard enough, then it's likely that you could develop what you could describe as chemtrail lung. Thank you, Dorian2112. He brought out a bucket of titanium blue wrenches. And I'm doing Discord reviews for members only. So from now on, your membership means something. It means you will have access to my daily breakdown of what happened in the IPS Discord server in the last 24 hours. So you don't have to go in there if you don't want to mix with those animals. I mean, researchers. Centero59, Brendan, Chris Diamond, Cassandra, Jenna Lovecraft Reeves, Sink Lloyd, Conscious Reality, Rodeus, They Lie We See, Janky Frame Covers, Scott Rankin, Haley Hadoken Harmon, David Hazel, McDirtywork, Henrik Portal Complex, Uncool Ben, John Scott, Indubitable Babble, Mark Simons have all received 18-inch blue titanium wrenches. Now, the IPS truck will be leaving these at your front door. Just make sure that no one in your neighborhood snatches the package there. It'll probably have a bow on it. Thanks for the support for keeping the IPS think tank rolling forward. And it's been a little slow and less than max efficiency. I mean, I haven't had an office space. I haven't had all my computers. There's been quite a lot that I haven't been able to do recently, but that's going to change. Oh, Till56, that show you mentioned, Bugani. Where can I watch that? Because I have access right now to Amazon and Netflix and I think one other, maybe Disney. But yeah, I was just trying to decide what am I going to watch, and I started to watch the Jake Paul fight, and I fell asleep during one of the opening fights. Look, I've tried. I mean, it's been almost 2 months since I've changed residences, so I haven't been really that stable, but things are about to stabilize. And I've been trying to watch Netflix, and I haven't had, it's not as easy as it once was. But for the next few days, I will have access to a number of these outlets, and I need to catch up on my programming. And when I watch the programming, I appreciate it as much as anybody. I mean, I consider myself to be a critic. I'm a critic of the world stage productions, the greatest show on earth, but I do appreciate all of the arts, even if I know it's there for propaganda purposes. It doesn't detract from my enjoyment. By the way, there's another movie called Atropia. So if you haven't seen that one, I'll probably find a trailer. Okay, so Atropia is a movie that is just now premiering. It follows a group of actors living in a simulation to help soldiers train for the Iraq War. And so if you watch the trailer, it looks like nothing but crisis actors at work. It looks pretty funny. Yeah, we're going to have to watch this one. The very real fictional nation of Atropia, how a fake country trained warfighters and got its own movie, Colonel John Mills. Those who've deployed to the nation of Atropia at a national training center will remember a complexly orchestrated battlefield simulation. Atropia is a long-standing, meticulously planned, fictional depiction of a war theater created by Army planners. It's an exercise prior to forward overseas deployment. The Army's biggest joke has its own movie. This is how they really do it. I mean, this is the very means by which you would create a simulation of a battle, a war, and then give it to the news. What's the difference? This is Wag the Dog. 24/7 warfare simulation. A town populated with civilian role players. Movie special effects designed to give our brave men and women the tools to fight and win. And if you haven't looked into it, the training dummies they use, the simulation training dolls, now they bleed, they sweat, they talk, they can be intubated. So we talk a lot about AI, generative AI, and how everything's fakeable. But the synthetic training dummies are more sophisticated than ever. If you go to my Twitter account, IPS Think Tank, I have the PSYOP programming timeline. I'm adding this to the appendix of the handbook. And that's the last thing I need to add tonight. And this shows what I was describing earlier, how you need to look at the timeline because all the events exist in a continuity. You can't be trapped in the daily news cycle where every day you treat it like it's a new day, as though the news media might be telling the truth that day. Well, no, it rests upon an edifice of lies. There's two timelines, the objective, real one, and then the long-term program they have for us, where they have simulated historic events that they will perform on the nightly news and reinforce into perpetuity. All of these events which have copious predictive programming to set us up for these things in advance. So what I have here is the PSYOP programming timeline, past, present, future. History, news, future events. And these correspond with predictive programming, concurrent programming, and the reinforcement programming. So this is just the standard method for introducing these fake events to us. They're planned in the future, and they exist in foreshadowing formats, in predictive content. When they happen on the news, they also flood the entertainment and all the influencers. You are in an immersive environment where you really can't escape it. And then into the future, you get endless reinforcement programming. So the Charlie Kirk event was reinforced with every subsequent discussion of it online by big media, big podcasters like Candace Owens, and then the Erica Kirk character. Every time she comes out and makes the news, it only reinforces the fake death of CK. And the idea that he was killed by some sinister forces and she's attached to it, if you believe that, then you bought the alternative media narrative. Yeah, exactly. Diana Southard, pre-enforced on South Park. Yeah, so the South Park one, you know, you could call it predictive programming, but some of the stuff is leading up to it. Like they're setting the stage. You know, like you put this character in front of everybody right before the event, like putting the golf ball on the tee. It's like this setup. So it's right before concurrent. But again, these are facets of every single fake event. One of the more interesting things we've seen lately, though, with this AM Fest has been the use of intentional Freudian slips, which give out multiple meanings. You know, one, it feeds the conspiracy theorists. Oh, look, they let it slip. It's a grift. She knew he was going to die. She let it slip that he was assassinated by J.D. Vance. So they are using the idea of Freudian slips to let the truthers know, like they got a leaked document. Just another tactic. It's all witchcraft. You know, I consider lying to be the very rudimentary, basic form of witchcraft and black magic. If we're talking about warping of reality, controlling minds, lying is really fundamental to it. So the slip up so far, noted by Planet Allison, once my husband was assassinated, using grifter instead of gifted, and then J.D. Vance assassin. And then you add to this, J.D. Vance consciously makes a joke, including a Freudian slip. So they sit around talking about this stuff. They have a great understanding of optics, how things look. So Erica Kirk in leather pants hugging J.D. Vance was 100% scripted to manufacture this outrage. Okay, let's see what else we have to go over. So we talked about Miles Mathis finally catching up on the JFK home assassination movie. We'll probably follow with that one a bit. I mean, I like Miles Mathis's articles. He's just not off-world stage perspective, which is questionable. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to notice when something is fake. It really doesn't. These days, it's essentially stating the obvious. The place where we're at now is beyond just calling things fake based on some kind of intuition or it looks fake. No, we're actually basing it on more than a dozen well-known hoax indicators and the wider media ecosystem. Can't have an over-reliance on slip-ups or mistakes on TV to see through these fake things. You should be able to deconstruct a staged event blindfolded. And we do it all the time. All right, let's see what else we have. We'll continue to follow the storylines, the subtext with the satanic psyops at the heart of TPUSA. And that's so consistent with what we've seen. If you read Mind Wars and the agenda, it's really not that surprising that somebody that connected with Thomas Aquinas, or Michael Aquinas rather, that somebody connected with the Temple of Set and that PSYOP doc would be right up there at TPUSA. It makes perfect sense because what Turning Point USA has been from the beginning has been an operation. It was never an organic organization. It was always meant to introduce the Turner Diaries narrative into the world stage. That was always a part of it. And CK was scripted to be this generation's JFK. And by the way, if you ever get a chance, if you're on X, go to the hashtag Metascript and just scroll through some of these things that we've posted over the years. And you can see how quickly it adds up. Earlier, I was talking about these recent movies that came out where you have like the Fantastic Four, and this one I think was Thunderbolts, where you have these movie villains that look just like politicians, like down to the details in the hair. But if you go through the hashtag Metascript, you'll find a lot of things that you may have missed. I've been using that one for some time. And the term Metascript is just to encompass the secondary timeline that infuses the one that we're on right now, the one that consists of all the fake events and all the fake people, and the one that is the focal point of media globally. But we've been following this long enough to where it's essentially predictable. It's actually very predictable. If the event is fake, there are certain hallmarks that you're going to see, certain indicators. And that's the reason why the book is out. So I'll send a link to it in case you want to pick up a signed copy, but otherwise I'll put out a link to get it on Amazon. We will be back 7 p.m. tomorrow, and if you're a member, a wrench holder, you will be able to catch the IPS Discord reviews, which are going to be daily uploads, and I'll likely get back to those tomorrow morning. I tried to upload one yesterday, had some technical issues, but I have a better system now. So thank you all for the comments. Thanks for the channel support. Go to ips.monster to access the Discord server.